You won't believe what happened in our quiet neighborhood. An 8-year-old girl was hit in the head with a bat by a man pretending to be an HOA officer. But the biggest mistake he made wasn't the assault. It was not knowing who her father was. And that mistake would change everything. It all began on a calm Saturday morning. The air was warm. The sound of lawnmowers hummed in the distance. And I was trimming the hedges in my front yard when I noticed a man walking back and forth near the sidewalk. He wore a black vest with big white letters that said HOA cop. At first I thought he might actually work for the neighborhood association. He had a clipboard in one hand and a radio clipped to his shoulder. But something about him didn't look right. His vest looked cheap, the patch on his chest was crooked and frayed, and his boots didn't match any official uniform I'd seen. That man was later identified as Derek Miles, and he was no officer, no HOA worker, not even a volunteer. He was just a bitter man who had decided to patrol the neighborhood on his own. He handed out fake warnings, shouted at kids and threatened families with made-up rules. That morning his attention turned to the Sanchez family across the street. Their little girl Maria was out front, wobbling along on her pink bicycle. Her laughter echoed as her helmet bounced with every pedal. She wasn't hurting anyone, just a kid enjoying her weekend. But Derek suddenly marched toward her, barking orders. "Hey, you can't ride there. That's community property." Maria slowed down, confused. She looked around, unsure what she had done wrong. I froze, shovel in hand, feeling something bad was about to happen. Her mom was inside taking care of their baby, and her dad wasn't home yet. Maria tried to pedal away, but Derek's anger exploded. He stomped toward his truck, yanked out a baseball bat from the back, and swung it, not at her bike but at her head. The sound of the hit was sickening, a hard crack that echoed across the street. Maria collapsed on the pavement. Her bike toppled beside her. Blood began to trickle from her temple. People screamed. I dropped my shovel and ran, but Derek didn't move an inch. He stood there breathing heavily, like he'd just done something heroic. "The rules will be obeyed," he shouted. "I'm the authority here." He actually believed it. While neighbors crowded around the injured child, Derek calmly started scribbling notes on his clipboard, as if this was all part of his job. He didn't even notice the roar of a black pickup truck speeding toward him. What he didn't know was that the driver of that truck was Maria's father, Detective Daniel Sanchez, and Derek was about to learn the difference between pretending to be the law and meeting the real thing. Daniel's truck screeched to a stop so hard it left black tire marks on the pavement. He jumped out before the engine even shut off, his face pale with fury, his sheriff's badge clipped to his belt. He pushed through the crowd of neighbors and dropped to his knees beside his daughter. Paramedics had just arrived, carefully lifting Maria onto a stretcher. Her small hand hung limp at her side. "Daddy's here," Daniel whispered, his voice shaking. "You're going to be okay, baby girl." Then he stood up, and the look in his eyes changed completely. He wasn't just a father anymore. He was a detective whose child had just been attacked. His gaze locked on Derek, who still clutched the bat like a trophy. "Drop it," Daniel ordered, his voice sharp and controlled. Derek sneered. "I'm acting under HOA authority. That kid was breaking rules. I had every right." The words barely left his mouth before Daniel lunged forward. In one swift move, he twisted the bat from Derek's hands and shoved him against his own truck. "You hit my daughter," Daniel growled, his face inches from Derek's. "You think wearing a vest and carrying a clipboard makes you the law? You're nothing but a coward in a costume." The neighbors gasped. Phones came out, recording every second. Derek's arrogance started to fade. He tried to stand tall again, muttering, "I was enforcing community standards. You can't scare me." Daniel reached behind his belt, pulled out his real badge, and slammed it against Derek's chest. "You should be scared," he said, "because I'm Detective Daniel Sanchez, and you just assaulted a child." "My child?" The color drained from Derek's face. He looked around and saw dozens of phones pointed at him, everyone capturing his downfall. "Wait," he stammered. "It was an accident. I didn't mean." "Save it," Daniel snapped. "Deputy, cuff him." A deputy who had just arrived hesitated for a moment, then obeyed. The sound of handcuffs clicking shut echoed down the street. Derek struggled, shouting, "You can't do this. I'm with the HOA. I have rights." Daniel leaned close, his voice like steel. "You're not with the HOA. You're a liar with a vest from the internet. The only right you have now is to remain silent." The crowd murmured, half disbelief, half satisfaction. For months, Derek had been a neighborhood bully, harassing anyone who questioned him. Now everyone saw the truth, but Daniel wasn't done. He wasn't just going to arrest Derek, he was going to make sure this man paid for every ounce of fear he'd caused. As Derek sat cuffed on the curb, Daniel turned to the deputies. "Collect every witness video," he ordered. "He's getting charged with assault with a deadly weapon, child endangerment, and impersonating an officer." Neighbors immediately stepped forward, offering recordings, statements, and months of screenshots showing Derek's fake warnings and threats. Derek's vest, now tossed aside, lay in the gutter, the white letters HOA cop smeared with dust and shame. Hospitals have their own kind of silence.
the kind filled with beeping monitors, soft voices, and the smell of antiseptic. Daniel sat beside Maria's bed for hours, as doctors and nurses moved in and out. They told him she'd suffered a concussion and needed surgery to control internal bleeding. He had seen worse scenes in his years on the force, but this was different. This wasn't some stranger on a case file. This was his child. He sat there through the night, holding her small hand, remembering every moment, her laughter, her pink helmet, the way she used to call him Super Daddy. When dawn finally came, she opened her eyes. "Daddy," she whispered weakly. He leaned closer. "I'm right here, baby. You're safe." Maria tried to smile, her lips trembling. "Did you catch the bad man?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Yes, sweetheart. He'll never hurt anyone again." She nodded slightly and drifted back to sleep. For the first time in 12 hours, Daniel allowed himself to breathe. By noon, the entire town knew what had happened. The video neighbors recorded had spread across every social media platform. News stations ran the headline, "Fake HOA officer attacks child, arrested by detective father." People all over the country were outraged. Comments flooded in, parents, officers, and community members demanding justice for Maria. But while the internet buzzed, Daniel was focused on one thing, making sure Derek Miles never saw another day of freedom. When Derek was booked into the county jail, the charges stacked high: felony assault with a deadly weapon, impersonating an officer, federal offense, child endangerment, obstruction of justice. The sheriff's department made it clear there would be no bail. The violence was too serious. Derek had crossed every possible line. Weeks passed. Maria's surgery went well, and though she still had headaches and nightmares, her spirit returned slowly. Neighbors dropped off meals, flowers, and cards. For once, the community felt united, not by fear, but by strength. When the trial began, the courtroom was packed. Derek sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, eyes sunken, his once defiant expression replaced with quiet panic. Daniel entered in his uniform, badge gleaming, but he didn't carry pride that day, only determination. The prosecutor opened with the footage, Derek swinging the bat, Maria collapsing, and his cold, emotionless stance afterward. Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Then came the testimonies. Neighbors after neighbors stood up, describing months of Derek's harassment, fake tickets, intimidation, trespassing. He had called himself the enforcer of HOA rules. Some families even admitted they had avoided going outside just to keep the peace. When Daniel took the stand, the room fell silent. He described what it felt like to see his daughter bleeding on the street. His voice didn't shake. It was steady, calm, powerful. "I've seen criminals hide behind many things, badges, titles, excuses," he said. "But this man hid behind false authority to hurt an innocent child. That's not confusion, that's cruelty." Derek's lawyer tried to argue mental stress and neighborhood disputes, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury didn't take long. After just 52 minutes of deliberation, they returned with the verdict: guilty on all counts. The judge's words were cold and final. "Mr. Miles, you pretended to be something you were not. You used fear and violence to control others. For that, you will serve 25 years in state prison." Gasps rippled through the courtroom, followed by relieved sighs from the neighbors in attendance. Derek's face crumpled. The man who once strutted through the neighborhood barking orders was now being led away in chains, his fake badge long gone. As he passed by Daniel, their eyes met for the last time. Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to. The silence between them said everything. "You took my peace. I took your freedom." Life slowly began to return to normal, but the neighborhood was forever changed. The HOA publicly apologized for not addressing Derek's behavior sooner. They introduced stricter background checks for volunteers and created a safety board run by real residents, not self-appointed officers. Children started playing outside again. Parents greeted each other without fear. Maria recovered stronger than anyone expected. She wore a small pink scar near her hairline, a mark of what she survived. But she also wore confidence. Her father took her to self-defense classes, and she proudly earned her first martial arts belt within a few months. Neighbors would smile when they saw her ride her bike again, the same one from that day, but this time under the warm gaze of a whole community standing behind her. Late one evening, Daniel sat on his porch, coffee in hand, watching the sunset. The faint sound of children playing drifted through the air. Maria's laughter echoed again, a sound he thought he might never hear. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. He had arrested countless criminals in his career, but none of them had ever hit this close to home. His wife joined him, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You did what any father would do," she said softly. He shook his head. "No, I did what I had to do, not just as a father, but as someone who believes the law still means something." She smiled. "You made sure justice wasn't just a word." He looked toward the street where it all happened. The pavement was clean now, the dark stains long gone, but he remembered everything. Every scream, every heartbeat, every second that turned an ordinary day into a fight for justice. Months later, the local news aired a follow-up. Maria Sanchez was fully recovered. Derek Miles remained in prison, serving his sentence without parole. The segment ended with a photo, Daniel and Maria smiling, standing beside a tree they planted together in their front yard. They called it the Tree of Second Chances, because even in the shadow of violence, life had found a way to heal. As Daniel tucked Maria into bed that night, she looked up at him and whispered, "Daddy, are you still mad at that man?" He smiled gently. "No, sweetheart, I'm not mad anymore. I just hope he learned what real authority means." She nodded, her eyes closing. "You're the real hero, Daddy." And as the night settled over the quiet neighborhood once again, Daniel finally felt peace, not because justice had been served in court, but because his daughter was safe, his community was stronger, and everyone finally understood that the power to protect doesn't come from a vest or a title. It comes from the heart.